Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa, France 24's program focused on the continent. I'm Charlie James, and here's what's ahead on the program. A rise in ethnic violence leads to the fall of Mali's government. The Prime Minister and his cabinet are out following fierce public anger over massacres. Protesters holding a sit-in outside Sudan's military headquarters face tough conditions, but they're also organized. Our reporters on the ground talk to volunteers, keeping it going. And he's a star in Rwanda, now touring across the continent. We introduce you to Yvan Buravan and his music inspired by familial love. Mali's Prime Minister and his entire cabinet have stepped down after just 16 months in office. The mass resignation related to an upsurge of violence in the country. Claire Muffson has more on the pressure from the public and Parliament.
This protest was the beginning of the end for Soumaïla Maïga. These images show opposition supporters and Muslim religious leaders taking to the streets together to demand he step down. On Wednesday, legislators submitted a motion of no confidence against the government, blaming the administration for failing to clamp down on violence gripping the center of the country. Last month, in the village of Ogasugu, 160 Fulani herders, including women and children, were killed by what appeared to be members of a rival community. It was bloody, even by recent standards of Mali's ever-worsening violence. The brutal massacre shocked the nation, prompting protests as the government failed to disarm the militia many believed responsible. President Keita announced Thursday that he'd accepted the prime minister's and the entire cabinet's resignation, and said he'd name a successor soon.
Just before Easter, a deadly tragedy at a church in South Africa. A wall collapsed at the start of a Passover service, killing at least 13 people at the Pentecostal church. It happened Thursday night in the coastal province of KwaZulu-Natal. Local officials have blamed the collapse on a storm's heavy rainfall and wind. Hundreds of thousands of demonstrators returned to Algeria's streets Friday, continuing to press for a complete overhaul of their government. The march was peaceful, just as most have been over the last 2 months. President Abdelaziz Bouteflika's resignation did not stop the protests, and neither has a planned July 4th election. The demonstrators say that isn't enough.
We came from Tizi Ouzou and Tigzir to take part in the demonstration. We come here every Friday from 4 a.m. to be here with our Algerian brothers. We've come from Algeria's 48 provinces. We've come together to topple the establishment because it's gone on far too long.
We're not going to stop, God willing. You may think we're here having fun when we come out every Friday. This is not a game for us. I swear that we will not stop until all the government leaves.
Next to Sudan, where 9 days after a coup that ousted Omar al-Bashir, protesters are still mobilized. By the thousands, they are battling scorching heat and fatigue to hold vigil outside the military headquarters. They are refusing to rest until the country's new military leaders hand over power to civilians. Our correspondent, Bastien Renouy, takes you there.
It's 8 a.m. Friday morning, and around the army headquarters, protesters are waking up one by one. It's here they've been protesting since April 6th, calling for the end of the military regime. They've occupied the neighborhood since that day.
90% of the people who stayed overnight have now gone home to sleep. They sleep between 9 a.m. and 1 in the afternoon. Then they'll come back to replace the others.
In the streets, people are chanting revolutionary songs. Some are selling flags. To camp out here in the square, they've come prepared. People delivering bread are passing through the streets. These trucks are bringing water, an essential in Khartoum's scorching heat. They're part of a company that supports the revolution.
We've split into 2 volunteer committees. We have lots of packs of water, and we're giving them out to people for free.
It's time for the Friday prayers. Thousands of people, little by little, come together to hear the Imam give a political speech.
The head of the transitional government needs to be qualified and shouldn't belong to any party. It's what we need for the people to be satisfied with this government and for an election to go forward.
After the prayers, many people stay in the streets. Some plan to spend the night, preparing for yet another day of protesting.
In Libya, fierce fighting continues between the forces of Khalifa Haftar and those backing the UN-recognized government. Though the conflict is centered around Tripoli, it's also hitting the economies of border areas. Shirley Sitbon tells us about one town in Tunisia where residents' lives have changed.
Ben Gurdan used to be a bustling town. Hard to believe, all these stores were open and packed with clients. The town is located near the border with Libya. All kinds of goods used to flow here.
Commodities used to enter the country on a regular basis. Since we're in the border area, traders had commodities from Turkey and China, but now imports and exports are obstructed, causing stores to shut down.
And since imports are obstructed, the price of the goods that do come in is higher, including the price of gas.
This gas costs us about 15 to 20 dinars, but since the war started it has become more expensive. It costs about 40 to 45 dinars. We used to get gas easily and cheap here at the border, but with the war we have faced many problems in transporting and receiving gas.
Like in many border towns, people in Ben Gurdan often live off of smuggling goods. They not only struggle with the unrest in Libya, their own government in Tunisia is cracking down on smuggling too. Some still keep their shops open, hoping clients would eventually return.
The ripple effect of Brexit has repercussions far beyond Europe. South Africa is particularly vulnerable since a great deal of the nation's trade is with Britain, and the impact will be worse if the UK leaves the bloc without a deal.
South Africa has a lot riding on Brexit. The country is by far the most important African trading partner for Britain, with volumes reaching over 40 billion euros a year. If South Africa's commercial treaties with Europe will not be affected by Brexit, the future of its trades with the UK remains unclear, especially if Britain leaves the EU customs union.
And in that event, the British have published a tariff schedule, and that tariff schedule says that for South Africa, all of the fruit-based exports, including wine and all of the fresh and processed fruit, would enter duty-free. There would be duties on motor products, and that is the big concern for South Africa.
South Africa is the continent's leading producer of automobiles, and increased tariffs on auto exports could prove fatal for its sales to the UK. The Southern African Customs Union, which includes South Africa and 4 of its neighboring countries, has been negotiating tariffs with the UK for years, but a final post-Brexit agreement has yet to be signed.
And finally on the program, we introduce you to a young singer who is already very famous in Rwanda. Yvan Buravan won the latest Discovery Award from our sister station, RFI, and he made his Paris debut this week. France 24 went to meet him.
He's the rising star of Rwanda's R&B scene. Yvan Buravan first came to the limelight in 2009, when at age 14 he won one of Rwanda's music talent shows. This past November, the now 23-year-old star became the latest winner of the Prix Découverte RFI, an annual competition involving artists from across Africa. He's been on tour around the continent since.
My lyrics are in Kinyarwanda, one of the official languages of Rwanda. But even though most of my audience doesn't understand the language, we still connect through the music. Sure, I also sing in English and in French, but my native language was never a barrier. It's been an amazing experience.
His first album, The Love Lab, released in 2018, resonates as an anthem to his love for music and his family. In the music video for his song Gara Gaza, he sings alongside his father, who accompanies him on the harmonica.
I was inspired by the love that surrounds me, the love that I get from my parents and from my brothers and sister. I'm surrounded by so much love, and I just thought, what's better to share than love?
Deeply rooted in his Rwandan origins, Buravan has shared the stage with some of the region's top artists, including Kenyan Afropop band Sauti Sol and Tanzania's Bongo Flava artist AY. After performing in 12 different African countries as well as in Paris, Buravan will bring his international tour to a close on April 23rd in Abidjan, Ivory Coast.
A great message for us all. That's all for this edition of Eye on Africa, but do stay with us. There's more news coming up next.